2,700 pounds, which would be how many kilograms?
Oh, I don't know. I didn't catch that. What did you say? I don't know.
2,700 pounds. That
I don't know. Isn't it about 3 times?
Double it. 2,700 by the square root of 6. This would weigh a lot, okay, in kilograms as well as pounds, okay? Weighs about what a compact car would weigh, okay? This is an armor-piercing shell. This can actually penetrate about 17 inches of armor it could pierce, or about 28 feet of reinforced concrete it could pierce. There's also another type of shell which is not up here called a high-capacity shell. It's a second type that could be fired from this gun. It actually creates a crater that's 50 feet in diameter and 23 feet deep. I better memorize all these kilograms and kilometers and stuff like that. I'll do that one day, I promise. Okay?
Really?
Well,
You're just saying it.
Okay, you probably have noticed these things sitting around all over the place. These are called canisters, and inside these canisters were stored gunpowder. We've cut one of them away. This is not gunpowder, so you don't have to worry. This is just a sample or a model, okay? And inside of each one of these were 3 of these bags. Each one of these bags, silk-covered bags, was 110 pounds, there we are, more figures, of gunpowder. So each one of these canisters would have 330 pounds of gunpowder. To fire one of these shells, they'd have to have 6 of these, 660 pounds of gunpowder. And what this gunpowder and shell would be brought down from down below. Remember the barbette down below would be about 77 to 100 men would man this gun to handle all that ammunition and actually fire the gun. If you look on the side of this gun, one of the things that this ship did, it was served in World War II, was decommissioned, brought back after that, and saw duty actually during Desert Storm and Desert Shield. If you remember CNN and you saw pictures of cruise missiles being shot to Baghdad, one of those photographs you saw was from this ship. But in addition to missiles being fired from the ship, they also fired these guns during that time. And so this particular turret, you see, has 3 shells, meaning all 3 guns fired 289 rounds. 289 of these were fired at those sites. That map is a silhouette of Kuwait. The top star is Kuwait City. The bottom star is the city of Khafji, which is right on the Saudi Arabia and Kuwait border. And then the palm tree is Falaka Island. And this ship fired shells at all of those, total all 3 turrets. There's 3 of these turrets. You see this one here, and then there's another one half, fired over 800 rounds during that time. Okay, we're going to go up to probably the most famous part of this ship, and that's... Yes, sir. Oh, what would these do? Okay. Yeah. What they were primarily doing is they were shooting onto the shore, and so these. Yeah. So like during Desert Storm, they were being fired at Saddam Hussein's tanks. They were being fired at convoys and reinforced pillboxes or places where he had set up things that needed to be blown up. So, okay, we're going to go up onto the surrender deck. Watch your step as we go. Aboard this ship.
There's a lot of ships. Yeah. Still an active base.
Oh yeah.
Here.
surrender deck. If I could have you kind of move a little closer because we don't want to interrupt that other group over there. This is called the surrender deck. And on September 2nd, 1945, the Japanese government surrendered and ended World War II on board this ship. Now, what's significant about the reason why this ship is here is the fact that what's right off the bow of this ship, which is the USS Arizona Memorial. It's only 300 yards that way. And the reason why this ship was brought here was they thought the two of them together would be like bookends of World War II. The war began for the United States on December 7th, 1941, off the bow on the USS Arizona, ended right where we're standing on September 2nd, 1945. So it was sort of like the bookends of World War II. So we are standing on that deck. Now, the war had come to a close actually on August 14th, 1945, when the Emperor of Japan got on the radio and said that hostilities must end. For many people, it was the first time they had ever heard the voice of the Japanese Emperor Hirohito. And so,
yeah. Won't you let us go?
Oh, sure. Sure. You know, there's an elevator right over there.
No, we like to go there.
All righty.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So, but it was decided that there would be a public surrender on board a ship. Now, the president at this time was President Harry S. Truman. Where is he from? Missouri. What's the name of this ship? USS MIssouri. This was his favorite ship. And so, as president, he decided that this would be where the surrender took place. There was a little grumbling about that because this ship, as you recall, didn't get out to the Pacific until 1944. So that was really the tail end of the war. There were more decorated ships, ships that had served longer. But if you're the president, you say it's going to be this ship, it's this ship. So, a flotilla of some 259 ships sailed into Tokyo Harbor. And they anchored there. Many of them still armed because they feared that perhaps the Japanese really weren't serious about surrendering. But it was decided then on September 2nd, 1945, the surrender would take place on board this ship and on this deck. Now, this deck was prepared in a special way by then General Douglas MacArthur, who was the Supreme Allied Commander. And Douglas MacArthur was an interesting man. He was certainly a hero, but also he had his quirks. He was a very interesting guy. He loved the press, for one thing. Well, one of the things he decided is he wanted to set up this deck in a very special way, the way he wanted it. One of the things they did is they turned this gun mount, this is turret number 2, about 30 degrees. So when the Japanese delegation came on board, they came up the same stairs you did. They'd have to pass underneath these guns. Kind of a little intimidation. The other thing they did is they had side boys. They were people who would honor people who would come on board. They chose side boys that were over 6 foot tall. So the poor Japanese would come in and they'd have to be looking up. The other thing is right over here they had a delegation of naval officers also over 6 foot tall. MacArthur wanted to slightly intimidate the delegates from Japan when they came on board. Now there was a delegation of about 11 who came here to be part of the surrender. Not the emperor, but his representatives. It was held in secret. The reason it was held in secret is that many of the Japanese government officials and military did not want to surrender, and the fear was that this 11-person delegation would either be kidnapped or killed prior to coming to the ship. Well, they in fact made it here. About 8:30 that morning, General Douglas MacArthur and Admiral Chester Nimitz walked right where we're standing and went up a ladder right over there and waited in a stateroom waiting for the Japanese delegation. He said he wanted that thing to start adding 0900, exactly 0900, exactly 9 a.m. About 9:02, no Japanese delegation. They weren't here yet. So MacArthur, he tipped his hand. He went looked out that cabin, saw no Japanese. He said, "I'm not waiting on the Japanese. The Japanese will wait on me." And so finally, about 9:03, the Japanese delegation does appear. The reason why they had been held up some was that one of the major delegates from the Japanese Empire was Foreign Minister Shigemitsu. He had a wooden leg. He had to struggle up the ladder, up the side of the ship, and the ladder you folks just walked up. So that was one of the reasons it was dragging behind. Well, finally, about 9:02, 9:03, MacArthur comes down. He approaches the microphone and says to the folks, to the Japanese delegation, this will be an unconditional surrender. At that point, he invites Foreign Minister Shigemitsu to come forward. He signs. Then the general who represented the Japanese military, named General Uemitsu, he comes forward. He signs. Then the delegates from the Allied countries, including the United States, the Netherlands, Canada, the British and Ireland, they came forward and signed. New Zealand, Australia, they also came forward. Not Nigeria, I'm sorry, they were not. And they came forward and signed. Now, Douglas MacArthur signed for all of the Allies. Now, being Douglas MacArthur, he couldn't do anything in a small one. So he signed with 5 pens. First pen he signed with, he gave it to a gentleman standing behind him, and his name was Lieutenant General Skinny Wainwright. And he had been the second in command in the Philippines. And he had been a POW the whole war. He was over 6 foot tall, weighed less than 100 pounds. He continued signing, handed to another gentleman by the name of Lieutenant General Percival. And he had been in charge of the detachment in Singapore. He also had been a POW, over 6 foot tall, weighed less than 100 pounds. Number 2 pen was handed to him. Number 3 pen, he put in his pocket. That would go to West Point, his alma mater. Continued signing. The 4th pen went in his pocket. That would go to the National Archives in Washington, D.C. And finally, he wrote Arthur, finally, with a special pen. Put that in his pocket. That went to his wife. Well, then the next people come forward were the other delegates. The last delegate was from New Zealand. It had been an overcast day, but when he finished signing his name, the sun came through the sky, the clouds, and created what almost looked like the Japanese battle flag with the beams that came from it. Well, MacArthur approached the microphone one last time, and he said words to this effect: "Let us pray that peace has now been brought to the world, and that God would preserve it always. These proceedings are now closed." 23 minutes. Japanese delegation left. One of the last things he did, he turned to one of the other admirals, Admiral Bill Halsey. Bill Bull Halsey. Nice name, Bill Bull Halsey. Turned to him, he said, "Bill, let them go." And unbeknownst to a lot of people, there was about 450 airplanes that had been circling Tokyo Harbor. At that signal, all the planes came over the top of the ship. Some of the sailors said it looked like it was going to hit the top of the mast, they were so low. September 2nd, 1945, World War II was now closed, now ended. Estimates are between 68 and 69 million people lost their lives during World War II. Greatest loss of human life in history. 2/3 of those were civilians, not military. The war was now over. Take a few minutes. Over here we have a plaque.